Well, good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, everyone. My name is Francis Purvey. I'm past president of SENFC, and it's my pleasure to sit in today in behalf of Joanna Behrens, our president, who is unavailable at this time. We have an exciting program this afternoon by excellent speakers, and we're pleased to see a good attendance at this event. We will have chat available and all of the things that you would expect. This, as you may know, is being recorded. It will be shown on the SENFC website. That's Sustainable Events Network Florida and Caribbean. The website is senfc.org, and that should be up by Friday and also on our YouTube channel. We are happy to have several of our board members here present today, but I do want to just go through, since we have quite a few non-members, a little bit about SENFC, where we got started some 4 or 5 years ago, and how we've prospered even through the COVID environment to get more people involved, especially in the meetings and events industries. Specifically, Sustainable Events Network mission is to lead the meetings and events industry in the advancement of sustainable practices in Florida and the Caribbean. It's a widespread program. We consider ourselves catalysts for everybody else, so we're particularly pleased to be involved and have partners with Florida Festivals and Events Association. I also bring to your attention, as I mentioned, the website, senfc.org, where you'll find future events, such as our February 2nd virtual networking. That's an opportunity for everybody to just chat and talk about, in this particular case, on February 2nd, sustainable gardening practices. This could be professionally or personal. And then on March 2nd at 4 p.m., we have sustainable hospitality suites as the focus. So we will be keeping up with everything. We'll have more educational programs throughout the year. It's our pleasure to greet everybody here today. I also want to bring to your attention the Florida Food Waste Prevention Week, which will be in April 10 to 16. And if you would like to know more about that, you can go to their website, which is, as you might expect, floridafoodwastepreventionweek.com. And let us not forget Earth Day is next April 22nd, as this will be the 52nd celebration of that event. SENFC is a membership-driven organization. We have individual members at $22 per year and corporate members at $88 per year, with extra benefits to those corporate entities. At this point in time, I want to introduce Sue Flack, who will be the moderator of this event. And Sue is not only a board member with Sustainable Events Network Florida and Caribbean, but she's also the Indian River County Recycling Coordinator, and has a great reputation in the state as well as the county as one of the gurus of the industry. So we're pleased to have her. Sue, it's all yours.
Wow, thank you, Francis, and welcome everybody. I'm so glad that you're all here today. And it is going to be my pleasure to introduce our two fantastic panelists. But before I do that, just a couple of quick housekeeping notes. As we all know from doing millions and bazillions of Zoom calls, please make sure you're muted so that we can give our undivided attention to our speakers. Also, just a reminder again, as Francis mentioned, this will be recorded and available within 48 hours at the very most. Francis works very quickly on the YouTube channel and the SENFC website. We will be fielding the chat questions as the event goes on. So if you do have a question or something you'd like to comment, please make sure you put it in the chat. We will hold off questions and answers until the end of the presentation today. And then we'll kind of just dive deep into that. I'm sure you'll have lots of great questions and comments. Suzanne will be providing all of you with a list of links that they'll be referring to within their presentation, and I will put that, or actually my co-worker Jill will be putting that into the chat at some point during the presentation as well. So keep checking that periodically, as you probably will want those important links. So with that, I give no more further ado to introduce Suzanne Neeb, who everyone really knows, I'm sure, as the CEO of the Florida Festival and Events Association, an astounding association with more than 600 members represented, lots of which are here today. So Suzanne, we are so pleased to have you, along with Sarah Gable, certified meeting professional and founder of Green Girl Events, near and dear to my heart in the world of sustainability and environmental sustainability. So with that, I will turn it over to Suzanne and Sarah to get started.
Thank you so much, Sue. We appreciate it. And to Francis and Joanna as well, too. Thank you so much for having us. We love being partners of SENFC, and we love the opportunities that SENFC provides for our members. So we're super excited about our 2023 partnership and what that looks like, and being able to present more sessions like this as a partnership to both sets of members. So thanks for being here. I just wanted to hop in and say hello. Between Sarah and I, we're going to kind of tag team this presentation. Really, essentially, we're talking about us as a first year, as an organization, a first year sustainability program, and what we were able to accomplish, how we were able to accomplish it, and then kind of what we learned along the way, including some challenges and things that we'll be looking at in 2023 and beyond. So before I have Sarah take over for the start of the program and introduce herself, I just want to personally thank her. She has been an amazing asset to our organization. She is a member of FFEA, a volunteer, someone who really essentially kind of took this committee and ran with it. It was her idea, and she'll talk about the inspiration behind that. And really, we would not have been able to accomplish, the majority of what we could without her volunteer leadership. So thank you, Sarah, for that. And I'm going to let you go ahead and get started then.
Thank you so much, Suzanne, and thank you, Sue, for the introduction, and to all of you for being here to, share this information with us this afternoon. I want to tell you a little bit about the next slide, our why, if you guys have a passion for doing something like this and creating your own sustainability plan for your organization, it's really important to start with your why. Like, what is it that motivated you to start this work to begin with? For those of you in the sustainability place, you know that there are challenges, and there are often times when things just get really uncomfortable. So keeping this why front and center can help propel you through those difficult times. So for me, I had always had a passion for sustainability. And as a child, I used to go around and measure our family's trash. And I even wrote a 4-H speech in 6th grade on how we could work together to save the planet. I was very ambitious back then. And then, as life goes on, it becomes more and more uncomfortable sometimes to think about those things and process it without, taking action. So during COVID, I think we were all presented with a unique opportunity. We had the chance to slow down for the first time, and although it was extremely scary for those of us in the event industry, it also brought creativity, insight, and innovation. We heard stories about the ozone improving due to lockdowns, and people were starting to notice the nature and wildlife in their own backyard for the first time. So during this time, my passion for sustainability had been reignited, and I decided to act. I had launched Green Girl Events in 2021 to help educate other event professionals and how we could bring sustainable practices to an industry that's always been incredibly wasteful. And I'm grateful that when I approached Suzanne back in 2021 about incorporating a sustainability plan into the 2022 FFEA conference, that she said yes. So this brings us to the story about the tools that we use to incorporate our sustainable practices into this conference, and tips on how you can replicate these practices for your own events. So here are your guideposts. We have ISO 20121, the Event Industry Council Sustainable Event Standards, and United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Although you can find everything on the internet these days, it's hard to know where to start, and the amount and types of information can just be very vast and overwhelming. So when it comes to planning sustainable events, these 3 resources are the most trusted and comprehensive. Next slide is ISO 2021. So this one is, it's a 50-page document, and it's best practices and guidance on how to plan a sustainable event. These were really the first standards of their kind, and they were launched in 2012, inspired by the London Olympic and Paralympic Games. The sustainability organizer, it started back in 2007. He was looking for a way to make good on their sustainability promises. So he was, I think his name is David Straub, was the originator of this standard. And it's really become one of the most widely used and most internationally known standards in the event industry. It's used in conferences like COP15, that was the very first one, the UN Conference on Climate Change, and of course, it's been used continuously for the Olympics since 2012. There's going to be, I just read, there's going to be a relaunch of, or a revision of some of these standards for ISO 2012-1. So keep an eye out for that, because everyone from the global event sector will be able to participate in that. And I think that that's a really important process if you're in this space, to speak up and use your voice to help enact change that's going to be meaningful for all of us. So some of the pros, or the pro, I would say, for this standards is that it's internationally, it's the most recognized for events. The cons is that it can feel a little bit overwhelming and it's not super clear cut. So that's the con in my opinion. And it can be certified by third-party evaluation. A great resource for this tool is Positive Impact Events, the website. So I will go ahead and copy and paste a link in the chat so you can visit that website for more information. Our next tool is the Sustainable Event Standards. So these were launched in 2019 by the Events Industry Council. And here in the US, we've had a lot of local contributors to these standards, including Dr. Aurora Benton, who a lot of us know, and she's been on several of the SENFC calls with us. So after a period of review, a lot of the people who were, in this group on this call were fortunate enough to participate in the revisions. And so in 2022, a revision was launched for these standards. The updates include around, I think it's 178 individual checkpoints. And so the way this works, if you meet at least 50% of the criteria, you can be certified at the very basic level, which is bronze, and then moving up, silver 65%, gold 80%, platinum 90%. The updates also include a much heavier emphasis on social responsibility. So you can see diversity, equity, and inclusion, accessibility, and social impact have been added to these standards. So that makes up roughly 35% of the criteria. The pro of using this is the checklists and examples make this an easy tool to use. One of the cons is that third-party evaluation can be costly. So for nonprofits or associations, that cost factor can be a little bit prohibitive. And then our next slide, the Sustainable Development Goals. So I believe most of us here are familiar with the SDGs, so I won't go into a lot of detail on this, but the goals themselves are not available for certification, but they're easy to use and implement. So we'll go into the SDGs, how we use them in our event in some of the following slides, and how they work towards our overall, or the overall goal for peace and prosperity for the people on the planet.
Thank you, Sarah. So we kind of, when we initially met as first Sarah and myself, and then collectively as a committee, talked about the process that we would use to move forward with the program. And we kind of defined 4 steps that we wanted to do in order to activate our sustainability plan. And the first thing that we did was to define our program goals. And overall, our target for the year was at least a 50% waste diversion. We wanted to make sure that at least 50% of our conference waste was being diverted from the landfill. And so that really kind of helped us set what some of our goals and objectives were. Obviously we would ideally like that number to be much higher, but we wanted to make sure that we were starting with something that we felt was going to be attainable so that we weren't overwhelming ourselves. And we also felt like starting was better than not starting. So that was the goal that we set for ourselves. In order to kind of figure out what that number was, Sarah and the team did quite a bit of research to figure out, how would we measure that? How would we know that 50% of it was diverted? And we'll get into that a little bit later, but these are the stats that we kind of pulled up. Now, these are for a conference, and I know some of you are producing festivals and events, so you may already have that data based on measurement tools from your event. If you work with a recycling provider or a waste management provider that can share with you exactly what your numbers were in the past, or if not, we can pull industry averages for you as well too. The next thing that we did was identify partners and volunteers to help implement our plan. We are, if you're not familiar with FFEA, and even if you are and don't know this, we are a small staff organization. I'm the only paid staff member of the organization. We also have a really great volunteer board of directors, and then now with sustainability, 14 volunteer committees that help us accomplish our goals. So Sarah and I knew going into this that there was no way we were going to be able to achieve our goals without partners and volunteers. So we put together a plan that basically said we would like to have partners for services, because we knew we didn't have a huge budget to be able to pay for some of the costs that would typically be associated with a plan. And so we kind of worked collectively on what types of things are we already offering our other partners that we could maybe offer as in-kind options for partners. So we were able to pull a partner for our composting service, for refillable water bottles. We looked for partners for donations that we could work with. And then our volunteer committee, as I've mentioned, was critical to making sure that the plan was successful. So we already had a sustainability chair. When Sarah approached me about the idea, she was smart. She said, "I will chair it," because she knew that was gonna be my next question. And then really, we put together kind of not really vice chairs, but more of like coordinators for different roles and responsibilities within the committee, so that everyone in the committee had different things that they were responsible for. And then we knew that our efforts would be successful if we had those volunteers assisting us. Step 3 was to implement the plan using one of the methods that Sarah just mentioned as a template. We will have links for all of those. You can ask them, you can email either Sarah or myself afterwards, and we'll share those links, or I think we're going to be putting them up in the chat as well too. They are great starting points. They can be overwhelming if you really kind of just look at them as a whole, but when you really start to dive into them, a lot of times there are things that we realize that, oh gosh, we're already doing that. Like there were things that was like, we had to do so many steps. So I think those are a really great template and a really great starting point for everyone. And then lastly, what we had found was communication was key, and it continues to be key. So communicating what our goals are, but also what our action items are with all of our stakeholders is really important. So when you think about your stakeholders, think about everyone that this plan is either going to impact or that you need to have their buy-in in order to make the impact that you're looking for. So for us, that meant our volunteers, all of our sponsors and exhibitors, our speakers, our attendees, and our service providers. And then think about what that communication plan looks like. Our communication plan started as early as 6 months prior to the event. And this is now what we're doing is still part of that communication plan. So, and include everything from, we have a dedicated web page on our sustainability efforts that we updated with our white paper post-conference. We used some social media posts to engage members to let them know what we're doing so that they can plan appropriately. We wanted them to bring their own reusable water bottle so that we didn't have to have water bottles everywhere. Well, if we didn't communicate that, then they wouldn't have known that. So we did that through social media, through email. During the event, we had push notifications that we used and the mobile app to remind people of different things that we were doing. We have online discussion boards where where people could say, hey, I'm driving from West Palm Beach. does anyone want to carpool or ride share together, that type of thing as well too. Those were really important for us. And then lastly, our communication program on site through digital signage and stage announcements. So there are lots of opportunities to make sure that everyone is in the know, both pre-event, during the event itself and then post-event. But we thought it was really important to make sure that we're mentioning that, because if it stays within your committee, you're not going to be successful.
Thanks, Suzanne. So now we're going into some of the SDGs, or Sustainable Development Goals, that we had mentioned in the first slide, in the first couple slides. And the first one that we're going to focus on here is SDG 4, which is quality education. So during the 22 conference, we implemented several new education sessions for sustainability and DEI. So some of these included our very own SENFC champions, Sue Flack. She participated in a panel discussion for zero waste events. And this discussion was informative, and it gave real life case studies on sustainable success stories. We had a total of 32 people who attended this breakout, which was really impressive for a first year session. We also had Joanna Behrens, who led a peer discussion group for zero food waste. We had 8 people who participated in this discussion, and it was really informative and interactive, and everyone who attended had great energy and just a lot to add to the discussion. And new to our sustainability committee for 2023 is Rosemary Prince, and Rosemary's on this call too. She's an avid sustainability enthusiast, and she gave a presentation about environmental stewardship through PLT, which is Project Learning Tree. Project Learning Tree is an initiative of the Sustainable Forestry Initiative, and it was developed to encourage an understanding and appreciation for nature. So for a first year program, we had great attendance and feedback for all of these events that were new to the slate. And following the event was a survey where 68% of the respondents had indicated that they were aware that FFEA had a sustainability program, which is great, because it's hard to tell if people are reacting to that or getting the information or reading the information. So I think that having that tool, the survey result was just a great way for us to kind of gauge and interact with those attendees. And the next SDG is, okay, so number 2, zero hunger. So prior to the conference, we had decided to partner with Samaritan Resource as a recipient for any leftover meals that we might have following the conference. Samaritan Resource Center is an organization that's designed to break the cycle of homelessness and poverty. And so it aligns perfectly with this goal for SDG 2, zero hunger. Following the conference, we were able to donate 50 meals and a 32-pound box of supplies. So although it was great that we were able to donate these meals, our top priority was really to be extremely efficient by eliminating food waste altogether. So to reduce food waste as much as possible, attendees were asked during registration which meals they were planning to attend, because again, the goal really should be on not creating waste to begin with. And so we were really cognizant of that during the conference, and that's an important part of it, just making sure you know exactly who's attending your meal functions, and properly planning for that is a really effective strategy. So for 2023, we plan to partner with Means Database. And so this is an organization, if you guys aren't familiar, that matches food donors to recipient organizations. And they help with transport, which is huge, because a lot of these nonprofits, that's a challenge for them, being able to pick up the food and transport it over to their location. So that is a great resource for anyone to utilize. The next one is, this one is my favorite, SDG 15, Life on Land. And we were really able to accomplish a great deal through our recycling efforts and our compost program. Through compost alone, we were able to divert 513 pounds of food waste from the landfill. And we'll go into more detail on this in the following slides, but we did just a couple challenges that I wanted to mention. Venues, it's important to discuss with the venue beforehand and find out what they will or will not recycle. We were working with Hyatt Regency Grand Cypress, and even though they are a part of the Florida Green Lodging Association and already have some sustainability initiatives of their own, they did not recycle glass. And so we did a lot of research trying to figure out how can we get this glass recycled. We called a lot of different organizations to see if they would be able to help. And essentially we kept coming to dead ends with this. So Suzanne ended up taking all of the glass back with her. Hopefully none of her neighbors got curious about like why she had 5 million alcohol bottles in her recycling bin. But you know, we were glad that she was able to do this. But again, just having those conversations beforehand and awareness of what, you know, is realistic for them is important in making sure that that plan is successful. We also switch all of the, I mean, it was basically aluminum, biodegradable cups for cocktails. So very little waste, which went into, you know, the trash cans and landfills. A lot of our products were, you know, designed to be put in the recycling bin, and that did work out great. There's a little note here. The average person generates 30+ pounds of waste per week, and 40 to 50% of that can be composted. I was aware that composting was a great tool during this program, but I don't think I realized how much of an impact it really makes until after we did this first conference. So 40 to 50%, that's a huge number. So just something to keep in mind. Definitely have compost if you are wanting to create a plan like this for your event. Once it's in the landfill, it produces methane, which is 80 times more potent than other greenhouse gases. So huge opportunity here. And then let me see. Is this still me? No, I think this is you, Suzanne. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry, I was muted, spaced out and muted. I apologize. SDG number 12 was our next one, responsible consumption and production. So this is another one where we really took a lot of action. One of the things that Sarah and I had talked about was like, it's great to make sure that we're recycling and composting, but what can we do to make sure that we're not even creating the waste in the first place? And this is one of the areas, the biggest areas for us where we made a lot of changes to the way that we operate that honestly were not hugely impactful on our side in terms of like creating additional work or anything like that. In some cases, they actually made us more efficient. So just a few examples of those. We reduced our single-use plastics. In a typical year, we would have about 2,200 plastic water bottles that we would distribute during the 3-day conference. This year, we asked everyone to bring their own water bottle, reusable water bottle, and we had water stations set up all throughout the event. In the event that they did not bring their own, we worked with a partner to provide reusable water bottles and had one available for each attendee. So we did not automatically give the person the water bottle, again, because we didn't want to create additional waste there, but we had them available for anyone to grab at the water stations and also at the registration desk. And we had a plan for any that were left over to be donated to Samaritan Resource Center as well, too. We eliminated the use of the majority of our paper. We have a lot of paper that kind of normally gets distributed at the event. So typically when attendees come in, they receive a welcome bag that's filled with brochures and business cards of sponsors and exhibitors. Instead, we switched to digital signage, and we utilized a mobile app partner that allowed exhibitors to actually upload digital versions of their brochures, upload videos, upload marketing collateral, all of that directly to the mobile app itself too. So we were able to make that switch. And then all of our award submission, exhibitor packets, marketing, a lot of things that we would normally do through the mail, we eliminated and switched over to a digital format. So anything where we would have, put advertising dollars into printed pieces, instead, we moved over to a digital format. any printed banners that we did have on site, we tried to switch to digital as much as possible, but there are certain instances where we did have to do printed banners. We worked with our signage partner, which is A3 Visual out of Miami, and they took those printed banners back with them to Miami and donated them to a non-profit organization that upcycled them into reusable totes as a fundraiser for that organization. So those were all done. I think it was about 50 pounds, we said, of banners that were taken back. And again, that was probably a third of what we would normally do in terms of printed signage. And then some of our other signage is reusable. So it might have been like generic for the year, and we now have and are able to use in the future. We asked our exhibitors, instead of considering doing like small tchotchkes at their booth, to do one giveaway for a larger item instead. And a lot of our exhibitors liked that because they were able to get exposure from the stage when we did the giveaways. It incentivized people to come by their booth to enter the drawing. The drawing was all done through the mobile app as well too. So we were not creating additional paper through doing a drawing or raffle tickets or anything like that. And the exhibitors were able to download automatically an Excel file of everyone that entered the drawing with their contact information immediately following the event. So they didn't have to sit there and scan in business cards or type in things as well too. So again, another efficiency that was created. We opted for sustainable speaker gifts and worked with a partner to create those. All of our meal functions, we used china instead of disposables. The only exception to that was the after hours hospitality, the cups that we use for cocktails there, but those were also, we worked with a partner on those, K2 Creative, and those were cups that were completely biodegradable that we used. And so that was a big change for us as well too, because that's typically about 2,000 to 3,000 cups as well too. And then we used all in-house linens and centerpieces to avoid on waste and shipping on some of our food and beverage functions and general sessions. This, the central location, Orlando, was chosen. It was chosen prior to us creating this committee and this initiatives. However, it is a strong consideration moving forward in the RFP process for us when we're looking at properties for starting in 2026, since we're contracted through 25, in terms of adding questions and requirements through the RFP process that will make sure that our hotel partners are going to be true partners with us when it comes to sustainability. I have examples of some of the questions that we're looking at including in the RFP. If anybody else wants to see those, I'm happy to share them. We are fortunate that this property was chosen as a Green Lodging certified partner. They had kind of maybe cut back or pulled back a little bit on some of their initiatives through COVID. And so we were kind of the first organization to really ask them to do some additional things they hadn't done, but I've heard back from them. They're not, now they kind of have learned through that process with us and are looking forward to working with other clients and partners on those things as well too. I mentioned earlier that attendees were encouraged to carpool through discussion boards and through chat groups on the mobile app. The majority of our attendees stay on site at the hotel unless they're local, but it eliminates the need for transportation back and forth to maybe other hotels. And then lastly, I had mentioned already, all of our marketing was digital to eliminate the need for shipping as well too. And I think this one's you, Sarah.
It is. Thank you, Suzanne. So here's just kind of a look. This is images, just a small sampling of some of the criteria that we met for the 22 conference and demonstrates how this particular tool can be used. So there were a few reasons why we chose the sustainable event standards as a benchmarking tool. The first is because it was a bit closer to home and we were able to, a lot of us locally were able to participate in the focus group for the revised standards that came out in 2022. The second is because these guidelines are a bit more specific and they're broken down into individual categories such as event organizer, venue, AV, food and beverage, etc. So that's helpful because it does add a little bit more specificity when you're doing an event like this. Lastly, the updated criteria includes an assessment area. So you can see some of these assessment examples that are given as part of the SEF guidelines. And it just makes it a little bit more clear cut. So Suzanne had mentioned earlier, it can seem pretty overwhelming when you first take a look at it, but when you kind of dive into it and take a moment to really go into detail on some of these, it really is helpful. And as she mentioned, we were already planning to do a lot of the initiatives that were listed in here. So this tool made a lot of sense for us. So although we chose not to become certified through third-party evaluation due to cost being prohibitive, we did follow these standards as a guideline for the 22 Level Up Conference. And based on the targets that we achieved, we were able to complete 65% of the standards. So we would have received a silver rating if we were certified. So the point here is, don't let, if costs are an issue and you can't afford to do something like this, don't let it deter you from continuing to use this as a tool, because it still can be used to effectively plan a sustainability plan or put something into place for your organization. And then the next slide.
Sorry, Sarah, it's my internet, and then I'll click it and then all of a sudden it's like 5 slides ahead.
That's okay. Okay, so this was our waste diversion statistics. And so a first-year program can be tricky because there's no previous metrics to compare your waste measurements. So to come up with a proper baseline measurement, we use data from Meet Green. So they had really, this was the most comprehensive data that has been collected on food waste, and they came up with a per person average per day at a conference. I had also conferred with Glenn Hansen. He runs iComply, which is the third-party certification agency. And so he confirmed that this was a good resource and it had accurate information. He actually said that the waste was probably a little bit higher than the 4.18 pounds per day and continues to go up. But the typical conference attendee, at the time, it was they produced 4.18 pounds of waste per day. So for a conference the size of FFEA, this adds up to around 4,400 pounds of waste over a 3-day period. So many events, they wrongly focus on sustainability initiatives that emphasize how much they can recycle or compost, which again is great, but I think that the priority really should be on how we can reduce the waste to begin with. So our key actions were refuse, reduce, reuse or donate, recycle and re-earth, which is compost. And we're proud to report that our biggest area of impact was the waste that we never created to begin with, as Suzanne mentioned, which was 2,685 pounds to be exact. Our second biggest area of impact was through our compost program, which we had mentioned we diverted over 500 pounds of food from the landfill. So here's just a graph that shows where we made an impact in each of these categories. And I'm really proud of the fact that this largest section here, 61.5%, was just waste that we never created. So, and next slide. Okay, and this is you.
Yes. One thing I wanted to mention, I'm going to go back just for one quick second, if my computer will let me. I'm sure kind of you guys are wondering, and I kind of wondered, and it took Sarah and I a little while to work through logistics on like, how are we going to get these numbers for weight, especially as being a small, staff organization with a small but mighty committee and a small budget. So I wanted to kind of just talk through how we came up with some of these numbers quickly, because I realized we didn't really address that. So compost, obviously we worked with a really great composting partner, and they were able to tell us the weight of the composting that they removed. The recycling, so we created a system with the recycling where it was kind of the simplest thing that we could come up with that we thought would be the most effective. There was a QR code that we created that was stuck to every recycling bin on the back. And the QR code linked to essentially a Google form. And we had volunteers that essentially at the end of each event, as we closed doors and kind of locked up for that event, would go through, and we just had like a portable scale, essentially would go through and weigh that bin, and then put that data, just scan the QR code from their phone and put that data into the form. And then post-event, we were able to just download the responses from the form to figure out what the weight of that recycling was. And then in terms of the weight of the trash, this is one where we opted to spend some money on out of a very minimal budget. And that was instead of us having to have volunteers actually like weighing garbage every night, we opted for a dedicated dumpster at the hotel that the hotel knew was ours, and they were not to put any other trash into that dumpster, but that any trash that came out of our event was to go directly into that dumpster. And then the dumpster rental then was weighed upon departure. So we know the weight of the garbage that was brought back. So that was just kind of a quick, other than me bringing home and my neighbors thinking the glass was unavoidable due to liquor bottles, full bottles of liquor, but all of our wine, beer, and soda were used in recycling bottles. But that was kind of how we came up with those measurements, just so I realized just now when Sarah was talking that we never really got into that. So clarifying that. Okay, so here are some of the action items that we took by area that we thought might be interesting to you guys or maybe useful. The biggest takeaway that I want to talk about and have you guys think about here is that while the committee did the bulk of the work on creating this plan and implementing this plan, it was not unknown at all to the rest of the committees that were working on conference that what our goals and objectives and initiatives were. So in the first call with every committee, we let them know that sustainability was going to be a focus for us, that we were going to be asking them to think about how they operate as a committee and things that they do and could do to help with our sustainability efforts, and most significantly with not creating the waste in the first place. And each month when we had our sustainability call, I would then report back from each of those individual committees on what they were working on in terms of making sure that we were hitting our goals. And then during each of the individual committees, I would report back to them on what the sustainability committee was working on. So when we talk about communication and the fact that, it's not just telling everyone to bring their own water bottle, it's kind of thinking about your organization, your event, your stakeholders as a whole, and how can you get them involved in order to create a more fluid process here. So I mentioned already kind of what we did at the trade show in terms of the mobile app. Normally we would mail out a printed packet to all of our exhibitors. It's pretty thick. It's got all of their guidelines and everything in it. And we've always done the digital version as well too, but we know a lot of our exhibitors do multiple shows and we don't want them to miss information. So we kind of hit them both ways, typically through the mail and digital. What we did this year, in addition to the digital packet, instead of mailing, we did a Zoom meeting. So a Zoom orientation where we talked about, here's how you can use the app to upload your brochures. Here's what to expect. And obviously it covered other things outside of sustainability, but we found that to be significantly more effective than just putting a bunch of paper in the mail. So that's one suggestion that you can do. And then lastly, we typically would have individual waste baskets in each exhibitor booth. Our fear with doing that this year was that we would be mixing waste with recycling. So we just eliminated that. And again, it was just a communication with the exhibitors to let them know. There were 6, I believe, Sarah can correct me if I'm wrong, recycling, compost, and waste stations located throughout the trade show floor. So they were never going super far to throw away garbage, if that makes sense. We also, I don't have it on here. I forgot about this one, but on the last day during teardown, we had a dedicated section of the ballroom where exhibitors could bring recycling. So if they had, and during setup too. So if they had cardboard or whatever, we had a dedicated area for them to drop that as well too. All of our award entries were digital. We in the past have done where our members had to mail in award entries in a printed binder, which typically would result in about 60 to 70 binders that were being created, mailed to me then taking to the hotel, us displaying at the hotel, and then me bringing back from the hotel. And so we just eliminated that. Instead, what we did is we created a section on our community board that's exclusive to our members that has the content of what would have been in those binders where people can click and view it. So instead of being able to flip through it at the actual event, which let's be honest, probably not a lot of people did, or if they did, they weren't actually reading the content that was in there. They now have access to that 24/7, 365 to be able to download and actually look at as well too. Any entries for t-shirts or promotional items were donated to Samaritan Resource Center, and all of our awards were picked up as opposed to mailed. If someone couldn't attend the conference in person to accept their award, we partnered them with a board member or an ambassador who's in their area and made sure that that person took home their awards, and then they could schedule a meetup afterwards to get their awards. And again, no mailing of postcards or entry packets. We talked about most of the major items on sponsorship already, which was that we eliminated those welcome bags and that switched the majority, about 65% of our sponsor signage to digital as well too. Marketing, again, removing any printed pieces and replacing that with digital advertising. In hospitality, which is our after hours, where we typically have an open bar. So there's a lot of waste that kind of gets generated there. That was our biggest focus area outside of some of our food and beverage events, switching all of our products to recyclable containers, using the biodegradable cups for cocktails, eliminating plastic water bottles and instead using water stations, and using the hotel's in-house linens and centerpieces. Our speakers, we made sure that all of our speakers were aware of what we were doing as well too, switched all of their agreements over to digital. You can do that through either Dropbox or DocuSign, and I'm sure there are lots of other partners out there too. Those are just the two that we use. Instead of single-use speaker arrival gifts, we opted for a reusable gift. So it was like, and we worked with a partner, K2 Creative, on that as well too. It was a rechargeable phone bank that they could carry with them as well too. And then asked all of our speakers if they had PowerPoints or handouts, that we just let them know we're not going to be printing anything this year, that everything will be downloadable via the app or the website. So we asked for that information from them in advance and included all that information in the app itself.
So it was great for us to kind of go through this first year program and see some of the areas of opportunity where we saw snags or room for improvement. And one of them was recycling. So working with volunteers can be a challenge. So you have to prepare for the fact that plans change or people might not show up. So learning this lesson in the first year was a valuable experience that helps us to better address this challenge for the 2023 conference. The materials and supplies, so we noticed the collection bins for the event credentials, it was confused with trash, and I kind of peeked in there at the end, and I noticed a lot of people just again, like it's great to learn these things moving forward. So we can plan to address this by including additional communication to attendees, or using smaller bins, which clearly, have the badge information clearly labeled for drop. Another area was the compost. So compost was definitely one of our biggest success stories, but it wasn't without its challenge. Because the hotel had not been in the habit of composting, all of the compost that we had collected from our first day had been thrown out. So that was roughly 300 pounds of food waste. Also, due to staffing shortages, our compost company wasn't able to provide staff for the final dinner. So that resulted in an additional estimated 100 pounds of food waste that had been thrown out. Despite these setbacks, this was still our biggest area of impact for waste diversion, and our partner O-Town Compost, they did such a phenomenal job. We worked with Charlie Pioli, and he was just excellent about communicating with the hotel and monitoring the compost bins and reporting back on our total amount of food waste that had been diverted after the program. So I'd highly encourage on-site composting as one of the keys for success for your event sustainability plan.
So I
So,
think that was all we have. And I don't know if there's any questions, or Sarah, I apologize, I cut you off there.
oh, that's okay. I was just gonna say, we hope that the insights shared during our journey were helpful to you in identifying ways that you can start and implement your own sustainability plans. So if you have any questions, we've included our contact information here. Please feel free to, shout out, send us an email. I did see we had a question above from, let me see here.
You had a question
one
from about
Mary.
contamination, which I thought
Right.
you addressed fairly well, Sarah. I mean, we all know it's inevitable. We're gonna have some kind of contamination at an event. But what were some of maybe give us some takeaway. What was your contamination rate, or what would you have visibly seen was your biggest contaminant? And you did address again, but maybe touch on it a little more, how you're going to fix that moving forward.
Yeah, so that's a great question, because yes, contamination is a big issue at all of, any event that implements a plan like this. Really what we did was kind of monitor those waste stations throughout, and we had one of those little grabber tools. So, throughout the program, we would kind of peek in, see, what was in there. And I was really surprised that it was actually quite minimal. I think towards the end of the conference, people are getting ready to leave, and they're, just wanting to get out of there. So there was a little bit more towards the end, but just having to physically separate some of those trash items from recycling, and then, taking it behind back of house and looking at it again to make sure. So it was really we physically had to separate the trash. And again, moving forward with 23, just having a bigger team of volunteers will help streamline those efforts. So I hope that answers the question.
And I just had a quick question to piggyback on that. So I noticed on your recycling containers, you had a Recycle Across America label, which to me is the Bible of all good labeling systems. How important to you was consistency overall? And did you consider that when you were planning your events?
I can take that, Sarah. So yeah, I think Sue, I learned a lot throughout this, and Sarah was the one that said to me, here are the labels you need to buy, Suzanne. So, and they were the Recycle Across America ones. But I think for us, that was really important, because as we're working as an organization, as an industry, as a community, on growing everyone's awareness of recycling and what can be recycled versus composted versus landfill, it's important that there's some consistency there. And I think that's why we opted for the Recycle Across America labels, because we felt like those were the most recognizable, but also that we wanted to kind of set that standard, as an organization, as an industry for our members. So the way that we set up the stations was there was never just a recycling bin. So cross-contamination wasn't as much as you would think it would normally be, because there was an opportunity for composting and also the opportunity for landfill and recycling all at the same time. So every station had all of those available. And so again, we're working with, event professionals and leaders. That's a little bit of a different situation than I think when you're in a festival setting and you have just the general public that maybe aren't as cognizant or as passionate as maybe some of us are about it. But I think labeling and then, using volunteers to check it was important for us.
Excellent. I know we're almost running out of time here, but I just also wanted to bring up, this is a really good question that came in about objections. How do you deal or overcome, with people who have objections to developing a sustainability plan for a conference? Perhaps they said an event that might come from your superiors.
You want to take that one?
Yeah. So again, I'm super fortunate here. We have an amazing board of directors here at FFEA. And so obviously anytime we create a new committee, it's going to go through them for approval first. And not only did I ask them for approval of this committee, but I also obviously asked them for their support. And then when they met collectively, decided that this was going to be sustainability as a whole was going to be part of our long range strategic plan as an organization. So I'm fortunate in that I didn't encounter that situation. However, if I had, I think in most instances, ROI and social impact are really important to a lot of individuals and organizations right now. And what we kind of figured out as we went through this is that the fact that certain things made us more efficient and made us think outside the box and brought us new partners that we would have not encountered before was huge for us as an organization. In addition to obviously the social impact that any sustainability plan has as a whole too. So I would say, just my personal advice, that's kind of the approach that I would take, would be to say, like, what impact is this going to have on the organization? And like I mentioned, our overall budget for this committee as a whole was less than $2,000. And that was because of partners and volunteers. And we know, moving forward that we can be successful. We were, successful at 80% waste aversion at the, and 65% of standards met. So obviously we're going to look to build on that. But I think anytime you can show impact, whether it's ROI or social impact, is always helpful.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank Sarah and Suzanne again for being here today and giving us all this helpful information. I know that we've been shooting some links across the chat. And so if you haven't had the opportunity to get those, you can certainly reach out to Sarah or Suzanne at their contact information. Also, again, to remind you, this is a pre-recorded event, which will be on the SENFC website. That's senfc.org or on the SENFC YouTube. So please make sure you check those out. And I want to thank everybody again, those that attended this today. And please make sure you check out our SENFC website often, as there's lots of helpful information there and continued support in any way you need it. So thank you all again very much for this presentation. It was great. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Sue. Thanks, everyone.